be talking about this next project. Just a quick introduction from me. We're going to be using a compositional rule called the rule of thirds, and I'm going to show you examples of that. Okay, so we're going to talk about the rule of thirds. The rule of thirds is a compositional rule that divides your photograph into 9 equal squares. Okay, and it places your focal point near any of those intersections or on those lines, and it really creates a lot of drama and interest to your photo composition. So if you're like, what? Here are some examples. So you can see how you have this kind of grid that is on the display, and this can be horizontal or vertical, so it can go kind of up and down and side to side. And what it does is it's used everywhere, in art, in photography, in film, and a lot of cameras even have a grid display option. And anytime you see those intersections or those lines, that's kind of where you want to put where it is you want to look in your picture. And I'm going to go and show you some cool examples of this. Oh, here we go. In this first one, you may have seen this before. This is from Jurassic Park. This is Chris Pratt. But if you put a grid over this still of this shot in this film, you'll see that it uses the rule of thirds really well. His hand is on an intersection, like part of his hand, but most importantly, his face that's in focus is in that other intersection. And it creates a kind of drama to the actual piece. Keeping with the film theme, just because I know that a lot of you will have seen this and you'll see it now over and over and over again as you visualize it in video and in film. But on the third, on that standing vertical third line, there is Thor standing, and his hand is pointing to that intersection on the left hand side. And it gives it drama, it gives it placement, it gives it balance. The hammer on one side balances out his figure on the other, and those trees they balance each other out, and it creates, again, more interest. It tells you where to look. It's something that you will really get used to and you'll see a ton of. Next one, you're going to see the rule of thirds again. So we have 9 equal parts, and you and me have seen The Incredibles. In this piece, you have the baby on 1/3 and the babysitter on the other third. And it tells you again where to look. Now, this is not a great example of a photograph because of why? It kind of breaks a couple of the suggestions I made in one of the first videos I made, which is it's got a pretty cluttered background, a lot of other things to look at, and it's kind of low lighting. But it illustrates the rule of thirds really well. So again, when you're cropping things or you're designing your composition, be aware of what's going on and around, and you can, when you're going to take your portrait picture, that you place your person on a third. One more and then we'll move on to some actual photographs, but this is a still from The Office, and you can see again that on the third is Jim, and it emphasizes where it is you want to look. This would not be an example of a great photograph because, again, it's taken in a really low lighting. It doesn't have great lighting. This is this goes off the style and quality of the show, but for a really composed, great photograph, you would want to get into some better lighting. But this is great for composition and showing you another example of the rule of thirds. Okay, I've shown you a lot of horizontal examples, and now I want to show you a vertical example where we're taller from top to bottom. The rule of thirds still applies, and in this example it really does a great job, and something that you want to look for in your portrait, which is your eyes are in focus. Your eyes are a great way to capture it. The eyes don't necessarily have to look down the lens of the camera like it does in this example, but if you put the eyes on the third, that's another powerful way to exercise the rule of thirds. And the other thing too is you don't have to show the entire person and the entire figure to take a successful portrait. You can crop it, and I'll tell some more examples here at the end of that, but you can crop it successfully and really bring your viewer into the focal point, the interest, the person that you're taking a picture of. Here is a successful portrait example for you. A couple things to note here is that this has a really simple background, okay? So nothing's distracting from where it is you want to look. And the girl, the subject of the photograph, is sitting on that third, and her eyes are along that top line. And so again, it adds that drama, it adds that interest, it adds a focal point of where it is you want your viewer to look and pay attention to. Now, this one has really great outdoor lighting, and it plays with shadows, which is great. This can be really a neat way to add more interest to your pictures. You just want to make sure that the shadows are aesthetically pleasing, meaning it really is concerned with, it's thoughtful, it's artful, it's composed with that placement, because sometimes shadows can be really too harsh. So if the shadows are too harsh, move to a different light, maybe have the light behind the person, really take it from different angles so you can be thoughtful in your composition for your portrait. But again, like, this is a really interesting picture, it makes it interesting, it works for this in this case. So although the picture works as is, by cropping the picture and it brings you more into the subject, and by even changing the color and into black and white, it really makes it all about the subject, and you wonder where she's looking or what she's doing, and it just gives it a different mood and feeling, right? So use your cropping tool to eliminate unwanted information and to really make it about the person you're taking a picture of. And when you do crop people, I have this little graphic right here that shows red lines and green lines. Green lines are appropriate places and good choices for cropping a person's body, and the red are just bad ideas. They always make it look funny, like cropping really close to the ears, or cropping people off at the ankles or right at their wrists. It makes it uncomfortable. So again, you can always take your shot from farther back, and then when you download the photograph onto your computer, you can crop it to emphasize the rule of thirds and to really show what it is you want. So this is a great photograph. It emphasizes the rule of thirds, and it also shows a little bit more of the figure, but it's still considered a portrait. It's about a person. Don't be afraid to, if you use something else like an animal or a prop, that you still make it about the person. And if you look at this, the grid lines up on that top line, and those eyes carry you through the picture. Another thing I really like about this photograph is that negative space, that empty space of clouds on the one side, that's where they're looking. So it creates an emphasis of where they're looking and gives them space to look. Really be conscious of that. If your person is looking out of the camera, like they're not looking into the lens of the camera, but they're looking out somewhere else, that you give them space to look to create balance. If you don't, it can be really awkward and uncomfortable, and they feel way too close to the edge of the frame. One last example that uses the rule of thirds really well, you can see that she is placed on a third of the photograph, and her face is in line with also another intersection of the third of the photograph. I'll have a grid come up here. But what's cool about this one is that it shows the background, which is busy, there's a lot going on, but it's blurred. And so that low depth of field, or the low aperture, or a selective focus, where she's in focus and the background's blurry, really adds a lot of visual interest, and make sure that your subject is the most important part. So if you do have a busy background and you want to include part of it, have it be blurry, and that would be a great way to use that. Okay, to really sum up, these are the main points that I want you to look at. Remember what we've already talked about, which is light and background. Make sure you have great lighting, that you're not taking it just indoors at night using a flash, that you are using natural lighting, light from a window, well-lit place or outside, and that your background isn't cluttered. It makes a huge difference in the overall quality and final image. I want you to compose your photo using the rule of thirds like I've shown you in the examples. Remember that you can always crop your picture so you're closer into your subject, and be mindful not to crop people directly at a joint like that one infographic. It can be really uncomfortable. Lastly, eyes are a great focus. Having your subject look away from the camera can add mystery, emotion, it can add drama, but having them look down the lens works too. Experiment, work with different angles and perspectives, getting down low, working at eye level, getting up high. You have tons of options, and take lots of pictures. I'm really excited to see the portraits and what you come up with. Thanks so much. And again, if you ever have any questions, please email me at jpeterson@utahonline.org. Thanks so much.